Thank you. Announcements. Public participation policy applies to all selectmen's meetings. A copy of it is in the back of each agenda posted in this meeting room and on our website. Let's see, public input. If there's any, come on up.
Good evening. Hello. I absolutely respect your public participation policy. I helped to develop it. I'm just wondering if you would indulge me in not having to wait until the second public input and just answer one question for me about something that's not on the agenda. Apparently there was a meeting that I was not included in regarding changing the location of voting. As school moderator, it's a meeting that I should have been invited to. And I'm just wondering if you can explain to me the genesis of wanting to change the location. I don't understand why. Is that something you're willing to answer in the first session of public input?
I don't have a problem with if everybody else has a problem. And to be honest with you, I thought that back there was and I think this was probably back when we first started, but I think there was something going on where somebody didn't want us voting up at the church at some point. That's probably something.
The issue was raised because of the town policy.
Right.
I think Selectman Holt raised that issue. If I remember right, maybe I could be wrong on that. Because it stated in the policy only for emergency reasons that we can meet other than a town-owned building. And it went to the lawyer sent back the response of saying school would not let us meet over there or change the schedule. That at this year it would have to be requested and then town meeting would have to change that vote this coming year, if I'm not mistaken on that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but yes, that was the discussion that had gone on a couple of years ago when originally we went to the church. I believe what you're referring to right now is the current issue at hand that was brought up at the last meeting. You weren't here. So was that over the last 2 or 3 months, we got in correspondence from the Archdiocese of Manchester, stating that all of their locations are going to require anybody that uses their buildings to buy a supplemental binder through their insurance company for roughly, it's a little over $400,000 worth of coverage. It was going to cost us $402 per session, per any kind of voting event, on top of also the stipulations of providing our own binder through Primex. So it came down to an issue of them, or I shouldn't say them. The Archdiocese of Manchester wasn't our local church, and Father Cole and things of that nature that and instituted it. So we had correspondence back and forth. I reached out to Primex. I had Primex answer those questions for us. The Archdiocese felt that apparently the Archdiocese of Philadelphia got sued for an incident during the voting, and that had trickled down this response to other areas. And through that, their insurance company has started to require this binder, saying that the municipalities and government entities are immune from prosecution, and that they're still going to be held liable, even though with our insurance binder. Primex didn't agree with that. Primex said that's not the case. And New Hampshire clearly has probably some different rules and regulations, tort laws, than some of the other states in the US. But they didn't, we gave them the information back to try to satisfy their concerns. And as of right now, they're sticking by it now, and we would be required to buy that insurance binder every time we vote there. So that's the issue the issue at hand.
And as far as nobody notifying you, Sydney, I'll fall on that sword because I didn't know that we needed to, and I apologize for that.
I understand.
But I didn't. I mean, obviously, if you were I would have definitely had you invited. Like I said, I'll follow on that, so I didn't know.
No, I'm not looking to point.
Right,
blame.
no, I
I just
got you.
wanted to understand the situation at hand and then offer a little bit of perspective from when I was a selectman and also a school board member. We did change the voting for valid reasons to the church. We did try a couple of other town-owned buildings and got a tremendous number of complaints regarding lack of parking. The inability to set up the proper number of voting booths is required by law. As you know, the Attorney General does check these things and popped in to do a full inspection at our last voting session. By law, they are looking to have you move people in and out within 10 minutes from time of check-in to voting to leaving, which would be tremendously difficult in any section of the school other than the cafeteria, which would then require the school to be closed for the day. We charge people for insurance to use any of our buildings, and so does the school. I don't think that what they're requesting is unreasonable. It's not unusual for any type of business to do that. I do think that it would be unfair to the students to have to cancel school for the day when we do have a perfectly reasonable place to hold the elections. In addition to that, we received so many complaints. I believe, Ruben, you were on the board at the time when we received the complaints when we had to change the meeting place 2 to 3 times as we tried to find something. People thought it was at the old place, and then we changed it to another place, and then we changed it again.
It's confusing.
It does. And so I hope that we will be able to reconcile a $402 fee to be able to have comfortable voting, not only, for the people that are at the polls from 7 until whenever we finish hand counting, which it's a very long time. But also for the parking situation, the ability to have handicap accessible entrances that are far more accessible than what we can have at the school, as well as the proper number of booths so that we are not in violation per the Attorney General's office. There's a lot of benefits to where it's held now. And if what is really behind all of this is $402 for each voting session, I do think we're very fortunate in this country to be able to get out and vote, and that is money well spent. And so I would encourage the board, make it easier for people to vote, not more difficult. And
I think, weren't we, because we already pay for that? Because don't our insurance already cover that? I think that weren't we, because would be double paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the reasons what we talked about was we'd be double paying for all these sessions.
right.
I'm part of it, but I mean, I understand what you're saying
Sure.
is that,
Well, the same thing sort of happens with like Castleberry Fairs, because they have their own insurance, but we require something as well. And so it's not unusual in today's litigious society for this to happen. And
Right.
and I think that everybody has to protect themselves, the town and the school. And I think $400 is pretty short money to ensure reasonable accommodations for voting.
I do, and I'm not, but I do believe that one of the other reasons why we looked into it was because there's a town policy saying that we're not supposed to hold voting in anything other than town buildings. So I think that's something that we also need to look at as well. So.
Which we did when I was on the board. We
Okay,
that was brought up the
thank
first
you.
year.
No, thank you.
There was a concern.
Last year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Actually, the warrant article that you're referring to. Oh, boy.
It's null and void now. Okay.
Yeah, avoided that policy.
There were some people that brought up separation of church and state, but
Gotcha.
throughout the state, it has been, the AG's office has allowed voting to take places in churches. And if you go to Manchester, that's primarily where they are.
In the bigger,
Yeah.
I got you.
We just simply don't have a town building large enough to accommodate. If we have the space, we don't have the parking. If we have the parking, we don't have the space. So it's a difficult situation, but
All right.
thank
Well,
you.
thank you.
I appreciate.
Thank you.
Lauren Carr. Will I take it then from now on, when it says public input 1, it will no longer say agenda items only? from now on? On your agenda?
Under agenda?
Yeah, public.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm
But
sorry.
one, it says limited to 3 minutes per person on agenda items only. So tonight you set the precedent, so that won't appear anymore on your future agendas, correct?
Well,
Well, no,
can
we
I
made
answer
a
that? Can I
vote
answer that,
and
Mr.
said it
Chairman?
was okay for this one time. We made an exception apparently, right? Is that? Not a
How
vote,
do you,
but-
how do you apply for this exception? I mean, I've been here, I come to almost every meeting, except when I go away for the summertime. I have to sit there in the audience and wait till the end of the meetings all year long. And now somebody comes up and says,
Absolutely.
tonight I'd like to have it different for me.
Can I answer, respond to that? If you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Board mind? Mr. Loring, as on other occasions, the selectmen do set policies, but also, as you know, policies have been waived in the past.
Mhm.
You have never asked once if you could bring something up that wasn't on the agenda item. The young lady that came before us tonight did ask if we would waive it tonight, so she wouldn't have to sit through a meeting. Well, whether or not she has another meeting, we decided to. So if you got up and you really had something important to say, which she did about the elections and the town meeting going on, the board felt that it was capable to hear her. It had to do with town business, especially official town business in the school, why she was not invited to a meeting, and also about the election process. I found nothing wrong with what she stated. If it was about plowing a road, maybe it might be a little different, but this was a little more important matter. So I have no reason to say that shouldn't be taken off there. If you want to come up some night and ask the board, try it. If it's the most important item, we'll see if the board will waive it.
Well, then, if that's going to be the policy, then why would you have it on the agenda here? It says agenda items only. That tells me.
Unfortunately,
be-
tonight, and you sat as selectman many times, and the selectmen, when you sat there, waived different policies at times. So there's no different tonight. Unfortunately, I'm sorry you're unhappy with it, but the board did what it had to do.
So I can come up anytime I want and just ask for a waiver from now on.
The board so chooses it, it's up to the board to waive it.
Okay, so there's no really any sense in putting this on here then, is there?
No, it's not true.
So it's just a seat of the pants.
I
Gonna be
guess
seat of the
we
pants
have to
while
agree
you
to
put it on
this.
your agenda.
Have to agree to disagree, mister.
This whole thing in the back of the page was developed because we had trouble with people speaking out. If you remember, we had one individual, attorney said we had to do this from now on. Now you're saying you're going to waiver that.
We waived it tonight for an individual. That's the first time in my 6 years we've been here that we waived it.
That's right. It's a first time.
First time in 6 years.
That's right.
But it's the first time an individual is asked.
I have some comments on this. I will wait till the end on that voting part. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Anybody else? All right, moving on. New business, the default budget.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Start off, please the board with the operating, with the default budget for the operating budget. I do have to, before starting, I have to make 2 edits. On the IT budget. If you could go to page 3, the IT department. So 4145 is the number budget. Line 507, website services. That had originally had an increase. There's a discussion of it being a contractual agreement. That has been deemed not to be contractual. What it is it's a renewal for a domain name. So it would hurt us obviously if we didn't do it, but it's not contractual. So we backed that number out. So the default budget will, for that line for 507, it will remain at $350.
350.
So now again, on line 519, it has security. That's for our cybersecurity. That's going to remain at $5,200. The original increase again was not formally contractual. It is a renewal of services, but it's not a contractual agreement.
That's on security.
Security, yes. So the new bottom line for IT budget would be 163, 285. Go to the end, I'll give you the new bottom line that would be proposing. The new bottom line for the entire default budget for the operating budget is 8,854,000. Sorry, I'll wait till everybody gets here. Sorry about that. It's 8,854,314. I apologize. Those are the only two edits I had on this, but other than that, we can flip through. I can answer any questions you have. We can go line by line, however the board would like to go through the default.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to have one thing stated for the record.
Sure.
We could, because we're going to get asked on it. We're going to get hit on it.
Sure.
Has to do with the COLA and the merit. None of the wages have changed that I'm reading, that I read earlier. And we've been hit on it every year that COLA is not a contractual agreement. Merit is not a contractual agreement.
Agreed.
But we did go back that COLA was, because that is part of our personnel policy. But I just want to state it for the record, why the selectmen are going further forward with it still. It's not that I don't agree with it, but we're going to be asked about it. We're going to have to defend it.
Right. COLA is not in this. COLA is not in this at all.
COLA's not in the merit's not in it either.
No, I went through it last year before we did.
So can I ask why your wages have stayed the same?
Why the wages stayed the same?
Why the wages have stayed as this year's? Okay, my mistake. My mistake. I was looking at I was looking at the other pages.
Okay.
My mistake.
All right. So,
I apologize.
so yeah, no, we did go through that again last year because it was my first year doing the
Yep.
default. We sought out some more legal advice on that, especially through the municipal association lawyers and attorneys, and they have stood by the fact that even COLA, even as though it's a personnel policy, that the COLA under their under RSA doesn't
That's too
fall.
bad because it isn't to the policy. So
Agreed.
that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think this COLA budget answers part of the previous questions,
Yes.
previous years.
So if you like, I'll glaze over through the changes are very minimal. And then in the elections and registrations budget, you see the increases. A lot of those are all involved in election law. And there are some reductions too, because we don't have as many elections next year. Going down, we're back into the IT budget. There were some, the big one is, you see there's a big increase in software down in offices. That is a contractual agreement, a written contract for Power DMS that we had entered into. Other than that, the other ones are a reduction because they were expenses that were no longer, were one-time expenses. Go through benefits. This was a discussion we had last year, and we did get some legal advice on that, but because we have made the changes with the healthcare and dental plans that we are required under federal law and state law and the Obamacare Act to make sure that we provide for what we need for the benefit increases. The 457 is by policy. And then New Hampshire retirement is by state law. And when you go into assessing, there is a contractual increase under line 184 in the assessing budget. And that is for the contract for Whitley Consultants that we're already currently in. Next one you're gonna come across is in the insurance budget again. This is for the workers' comp, unemployment composition, liability deductible, and property and liability insurance. These are all fall under RSA 4013. Two of them are a decrease based on the numbers that we got from Primex, and one of them is the increase, the property and liability insurance. Highway Department, you'll see there's two reductions. Those reductions were because they were encumbered funds in that line from last year. So one was 111 dues and fees, and the other one was 181. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, 181. And again, that money's being deducted out of the default. And I believe that is it. Because it's going to be a little bit. Sorry.
What are the wishes?
Chairman, I make a motion to approve the default budget, $8,854,314.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, thank you. So right after that, you have the water budget. And there's only one change on this one, and it's a reduction. You'll see under line 900, we took out the $39,308 because we already made that final well payment. So that was pulled out going into the default. So the default's a reduction of $39,308, putting the default would be at $480,764.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the water department's default budget of $480,764.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Old business. Conditional approval of Hopewell Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name's Jim Rhines and I am from Horizons Engineering of the White Mountain Survey Division. And I know that this had come before the board several weeks ago. And we were in the process of doing a survey, and the board was aware that the walls were in the right of way. And my understanding is that there was a request made to remove the walls entirely. And so I'm here this evening. Now we have got a survey of the plan to show exactly what's out there. And you can see that on the westerly side of the driveway, there are 4 utility stanchions. 3 are inside the right of way, the closest one 6.7 feet away, and the next closest one at 10.2 feet. And what I'm here tonight is to see if the board would be willing to allow us to pull the wall back so that it protected the closest utility vault there. So it would be about 6.7 feet off of the edge of the pavement and the curb that's there. I've submitted a couple of photos to show the wall. I think that, the reason that it was so close was so that mail could be delivered in it without anybody getting out of the vehicle. Obviously, moving it back 6.7 feet won't be a possibility anymore. But Flying B is willing to grant a waiver of liability. And in speaking with the Public Works Director, he said, given the substantial nature of the existing wall, there was even a concern, if a plow struck it or something, that could be damage to town equipment. And Flying B had indicated that they would be willing to make a capital contribution for any plow damage as well, if there was some latitude to be able to retain some of this wall. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Jim, is this line, the dotted line right close to the stone wall, is that where they intend on cutting the wall back to?
No, those are Brock. Those are the actual right of way line. This is, so what I would propose is bringing this wall back so that it protects the electric.
Back to the 6.7.
Yeah, back to the 6.7.
All right, so I apologize to you guys. I thought that was the line that.
Yeah.
I've got a highlighted version here if it helps at all. It goes. So these are the stanchions that are in the photograph here.
Now, this wall, the other wall, you don't plan on.
We would ask that, since that one's further back, that the board was willing to have see exactly where it is. Allow that to remain.
If it pleases the board, Mr. Chairman, would you guys like to hear from the Public Works
I
Department?
definitely, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Because I'm sure he's looked at this stuff.
Yeah, I've had conversation with Mr. Rhines and reviewed the survey as well. And I don't have any hardship as long as there's a waiver that's been signed in regards to bringing it back to the utilities. For the mere fact is, there's a couple different, if in fact the truck is that far off the road, there's a power transformer there, there's a telephone stanchion, we deal with telephone stanchions all the time, but certainly that it's not an approved location, but it would be, certainly, my opinion, it could certainly be acceptable and be able to be a compromise in this situation. That way, as long as everything was secured. If they're that far off the road, then we got a situation there, but unless we got the blizzard of 78 back again, and we'll be contending with that, but.
No, up on Lakewood Estates, when the town took that over, the transformers for the electric and the telephone stanchions, they're right on the edge of the road. They're only maybe about 4 feet off. Town's never hit one of those, but they're well marked too.
Right.
Not saying that it could never happen, but it couldn't. But all these years it has worked. I would go along with bringing the wall back to protect the stanchion. That's the 6.7 feet. I think you said, Jim, in your plan. I would have no problem with that on the recommendations of the Public Works Director.
And
As long as there's a waiver signed and of damage and responsibility.
Yeah, I have no issues with that either.
I didn't realize.
The wall that we put there in the first place. Right now.
So I think at this point, Mr. Chairman, if the board's consensus is to go with this, I think we need to do an amended motion to accept Hopewell Brick Car with the condition that the existing wall on the left-hand side be moved back to the 6.7 foot mark.
Mr. Chairman, could I just maybe say the west side?
Yes.
So that, okay, depending on which direction you're coming from.
Yeah.
Makes a little more sense.
And I don't have an issue with it either. The only thing I have is like, I'm pretty sure they knew that we were in the middle of this when they were building that wall. So it's kind of like they went ahead and did it without any care for what the town was doing. But like I said, where they've made the attempt to move it back,
Yeah, I think that it was, I'm not sure if the Flying Bee was aware of the ongoing thing that the Bears were trying to do of getting it taken over, because of two different parties.
all right, well, I'll entertain a motion.
Ryan, could you give me the date of the last meeting when we made the original motion? Do you remember that? Because I believe I made the motion back then, so
I
I
think
just
it
want
was
to have.
2 meetings ago, so whatever that.
November 7th.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to rescind the motion for Hopewell Lane of the requirements of removing the stone wall out of the town right away, amending it to moving the west side stone wall back 6.7 feet with a condition of a waiver of liability on the town and also a waiver of liability for any damages to vehicles of the town.
Get a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Might as well stay right there. Highway Department, Highway Equipment CRF withdrawal.
So I put together this memo. I kind of wish that I had included this in the memo back on it's here on November. But in looking at or so the entire fleet and what is forecasted after the approval on the CIP plan, I think would be the best move going forward at this juncture to prepare us for the next phase relative to on the public works implementation, dealing with equipment and everything else. So as I've outlined here, basically, as you know, you had approved back in May, the initial purchase of the 2 fleet vehicles. They did come in ahead of schedule, that did have a savings with that. And basically by adding this withdrawal, we will eat up that savings and there'll be a few $100s more in order to accomplish adding the polycaster sander to the new 2022 F-350 pickup, which will be utilized by the highway department initially, and then I would be looking to then transfer and or utilize it now because of our short staff by the grounds and maintenance folks there as they do their parking lots and help us plow. They'll be giving us some assistance this year. Hopefully, they're shorthanded as well, but in doing the plowing operations. So that's what I'm asking the board to consider and allowing us to make that purchase and pull it from the capital reserve account.
So between what you saved and it's a difference of $750 to put a brand new
Yep.
sander in the truck. I think that's. As far as I'm concerned, that's fine.
If the board has any reservations, I mean, I'm sure I can find $750 in the existing highway budget if you'd feel more comfortable with trying to balance this project, but it is part of the capital for the equipment. So that's the reason why I moved it forward as such, but
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve Public Works Director purchase Alton Motorsports polycast standard 1.8 cubic yards. Amount of $6,925 come out of the highway capital reserve fund.
I second that.
All those in favor? Well, actually,
Aye.
any discussion? Sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Local emergency operations plan.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I remember back at the end of last year, we had approved moving forward with the submission of grants for our hazardous mitigation plan and our emergency operation or local emergency operations plan. Like most entities right now, emergency management has also gone through some employee loss and setbacks. So our hazardous mitigation plan grant got submitted got approved about 4 months ago. This is the local emergency operations grant. So this is the actual grant application that has been preliminarily approved. Needs to go back through governor and council after we execute this. So a total project cost is $9,000, $4,500 of which will be funded from a emergency management performance grant. That 4,500%, 50% match can be either a hard match in cash, or we can do a soft match. And a lot of our emergency management team meetings that went on during COVID will count towards that soft match. So we will probably eat that up pretty quick and easy based on those. If there are no concerns or questions, I just give you this. They have specific language that they want in our motions or approvals.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So, but
Anybody have an issue with that? All right, so I'll go ahead and make the motion to accept the terms of the emergency management performance grant as presented in the amount of $4,500 for the LEOP update. Furthermore, the board acknowledges that the total cost of this project will be $9,000, in which the town will be responsible for a 50% match of $4,500, and authorize the town administrator to sign all documents related to the grant.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
thank you.
Thank you. (2023) federal holidays.
Mr. Chairman, I had mentioned the change in the federal holiday list a few meetings ago. Just to give you folks a thought, it's something that's been going around between the other municipalities and on the listserv. So what I've done is I updated the 2023 recognized federal holiday list. As you know, our personnel policy mimics the federal holidays. At this point, we've eliminating our floating holidays and just closed the town hall because it was getting a little bit difficult with the floaters. Some working, some not working. But with this new holiday list, all of them included, I was looking to get some vote from the board as to whether or not we want to adopt the 2023 list or.
What, how many holidays, refresh my memory, how many holidays do we?
It'd be 13 was the new one. It'd be 13 now. It was 12 before, now that'll be
Early 12.
13.
Well, it says 11. Two of them, yeah, just the date, but the observed date is
13.
different.
Paper. It says 11 federal, but it shows 13 on the paper.
I counted them up, there's 11 listed here. Actually, there's 13, but two of them are just,
Oh, two of them are overlaps.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. Yep,
you know, the January 1st is.
yep. So that would, so you're right,
It's
Bob.
observed on the 2nd, for example.
You're correct. There's two of them that are the same in here.
Yep. Oh, yeah, the observed.
Because they're on the
I
week.
see what-
They're
yeah, I get
observed.
what
and-
you're saying, yes.
One, town offices would be closed anyways on January 1st, because it's a Sunday.
Yes.
Highway department would, otherwise it's snowing. The
Mhm.
only one that would be open was solid
Transfer
waste. Center.
station.
Fire department also open because of schedules.
Right. I think it's pretty much the same we've been doing with the exception.
I
of
think
the-
we should follow the federal rule. Banks are closed mostly on the
Yep.
federal rule. We shouldn't veer off it, even though we might not agree with all the holidays, we should individually, we should follow the federal rule. Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to approve the US federal holiday 2023 schedule for the town of Alton.
I'll second it. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Selectmen's reports. Mr. Holt, Mr. Morse,
Nothing.
Mr. Wentworth.
Conservation Commission is doing their land monitoring right now. They're finishing up, making their records and recommendations and also the reports to the state.
We have nothing. Town administrator report.
Okay. First of all, I just wanted to let you know, I'm gonna put the county delegation sent over their a proposed budget for their public hearing. They're going to be having a public hearing on December 12th, 2022 at 6:30 PM at the county complex, 34 County Drive, Laconia, New Hampshire, conference room 1. And they're going to present the budget and hear any public input, but I'm going to put a copy of this for all the board members to look at and read. I just wanted to draw attention to it in case any of you would like to attend a public hearing, or if there's something that you would like me to personally bring to the hearing on behalf of the town. Either way. The next thing I got for you is there is a policy change in front of you, and this was something that Public Works Director had brought to me, and then we looked at it, the situation specifically to his department, and then we looked at it globally in the employee handbook. So currently in the employee handbook book, if you take a sick day at all during the 44 pay week, you're not eligible to receive any overtime. And the concern is especially this day and age with what's going on. For instance, in his particular situation with his department, you got a guy that takes a sick day on Monday or Tuesday and then gets called in on Friday night to plow, doesn't get any overtime, he gets straight time. So we're looking not to promote or encourage people to push the boundaries when it comes to illness right now, because it, obviously it could take out most of our crew if it's something more serious and they're trying to work through it. Just not, especially during the winter months when some of these departments really are pulling, the plowing and the call outs are a big part of some of their winter income. So we looked at it from a long standpoint, because you also got full-time fire now, you got full-time police. When they take sick day, if they were forced in on a day off to cover for illness or anything like that, they're not going to be getting any of their overtime pay. So the recommendation is on that policy itself, that overtime pay shall also be granted when pre-approved vacation, personal time bonus, sick and holiday is taken in a 40-hour span. Before, it just excluded sick. We put the red in for the whole paragraph, for the whole sentence. But really what it is we're adding in sick leave amongst the earned time.
Does that mean if somebody's sick for 40 hours for a week and then they come in on Friday, Saturday and Sunday, they get overtime?
Well, no, because also part of that policy is also with pre-approval, the public work of the department head or the town administrator. So in those extreme situations where somebody's sick all week long and then all of a sudden says, oh, I feel well enough to come plow
On overtime.
on overtime, that's not something that would be approved. Really it's the ability.
So it's
to
gonna be a
take
case by case situation, is that?
Basically, you're given this policy as written gives the department heads and the town administrator the flexibility to be able to address each situation if.
Pretty much police it, so if somebody's taking advantage.
Right, so that it's not an abuse situation, but legitimately if,
I mean, if you're sick on Monday and you gotta plow for 30 hours straight, I don't have an issue with that, but like where I'm at, if you're sick on Monday and you have a sick day, you still have to work 48 hours before you get put on overtime. You know what I'm saying? You still have to literally work for 48 hours. And once you've worked 48 hours, then you get your overtime. But I mean,
So that's not like that in the old or our previous policy.
No, the previous policy, if you were called out and basically sick time was not being counted as work or time
Right.
worked.
Yep. No, I
You had
agree.
to work, you actually had to work physically 40 hours before you got overtime.
right.
So, but I was just making sure, because that's how I remember. You gotta work the 40, say you're out one day, so you have to work 48 hours before you get the
You had
overtime.
to work 40 hours.
Right.
Right, yeah, counting your 6 times 48.
You still have to work 40, but 8 of them was already taken up, used
Right,
by
correct.
holiday. I mean, or
That's what
whatever.
that's what we've always, so that's how the policy was before.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like. Okay, I saw, I was just, for a second, I thought it was. If you took Monday off, you had to work the rest of the week, and even though if you worked 12 hours, you only got. Regular time to 12, but it's only the first 8, and then you get.
Right, once you've made up the hours that you
Yeah.
missed in being sick, you can start your overtime
Okay,
again.
that's how I thought it worked, at least. Okay.
Also have regular work pay, work hours. Body of snow plowing like in winter. After your work, scheduled work hours. So. Employees calls in sick on Monday. Works the rest of the week. Shy 8 hours of the 40, he's through. He gets called in Saturday night. Go plow snow for 8 hours,
That's straight time.
straight time. Way it is now.
Right, and I see what the director's doing is if you do that, now he's down a guy because they're gonna be like, well, I'm not getting paid overtime, so I'm not coming in. I get that,
Either that.
but I just,
A lot of. It's possibly. Working sick.
That's more so where it's going in that direction, not so much people that aren't coming in. It's people that are forcing themselves in who shouldn't be in the workplace, and then.
Then they spreading.
But doesn't the department head then at that point have the right to say you need to go home because you're not feeling good?
Yes.
Because you've been out for 2 days?
hmm,
I'm against this.
Okay.
I mean, and it's, call me old fashioned.
Mhm.
If you work a total of 40 hours, you get time and a half. I am of the point though, if you work an 8-hour day and you go into 10 hours that night or 12 hours that night, after 8 worked hours,
Get
you
paid.
should be getting overtime.
I agree with
That
that.
I
as
don't
well.
have a problem with. But it's ones that do take advantage of the situation, say, geez, I want a long weekend, take a long weekend. Now they can take a long weekend, come in Tuesday, work the rest of the week and you paid overtime. I'm not for that. I'm not for allowing the department heads. We should have, to me, we should have a set policy. If you want to change policy and say, if you work more than 8 hours in a given day, except during the summer when we go to 10-hour days for the highway department, I don't mind paying that time and a half after 8-hour work day. If you want to change it to that, I would go along with that, but I won't go along with this policy.
If you don't mind, would Scott speak to some of the specific situations that he was dealing with?
I don't wholeheartedly go with what you're talking about. Selectman Wentworth. I just find that most towns, well, some towns do and some towns don't. The real purposes of changing this for us is I've had already COVID go through our shop at least 3 times, if not 4 times. And most of our staff has to be out at least a minimum of, 5 days, and we, once again, I have staff that calls me all the time and says, listen, I'm coughing and hacking. I had one guy on the phone this morning, they're asking me, what do you want me to do? I said, you need to stay home. So once I tell them to stay home,
You gotta pay.
and then we got an ice storm tomorrow night and they got to come in and plow. They're saying, well, geez, thanks. I would have come in and coughed and hacked all over everybody there at the shop so I could get my overtime because that's how they make their money. But it's really about just what you said, working the 8 hours and then having that extra. Then, I'd wholeheartedly support that change in policy in that situation. But the real crutch of this all was because we have people that end up coming down with COVID, or they come down. I have one guy right now that has pneumonia. And so there's been a lot of this respiratory sickness that's been going through. And as soon as somebody comes in and they are still not well enough, it goes through our place. It's worse than COVID at times. And I've had the foreman's been, believe it or not, he's been sanitizing more than I would have ever expected him, because that's just not our nature. We tend to be tough and grin and bear it and go for it, but it's, we're short staffed and we got to get people well. But we don't want to discourage the morale side of things, and compensating them for working those extra hours, in that situation there. I'm fortunate the crew that I have does not abuse that situation. And, that's the reason why in talking to the town administrator, we want to make sure that it was in there, that the department had that discretion. If in fact it was another issue that was going on, that maybe didn't warrant, some people end up having to take some time for other conditions, that maybe isn't something that's gonna, extend to somebody else, in a, pass on of a medical situation. So, those are kind of dealt with on a case by case basis individually. So. But if the board would, be willing to go with anything over 8's overtime, I would be fine with that. But I haven't talked to town administrator and we didn't go there because of the way the policy has been currently.
I rather myself, I would vote for that policy. Anything worked over 8 hours, time and a half. I'd have no problem with that. As to say that this way here, I'd feel better. I just feel regular stand hours, 8 hours. If you're required to work after 8 hours after your shift, you should be getting time and a half. I have never.
See, and I kind of like that idea better. That way, if you are sick, the next day you start out, you work your 8 hours. And if you're there longer than 8 hours, you still get your overtime. You don't lose it. But to just say, we're going to let you take the whole week off and then you want to come in on Saturday and Sunday for your big, I would rather see it that way as well. As after 8, you get time and a half. But
Yeah,
it's up to everybody.
I know it's hard with a big crew.
I don't know if you can do that, Jen.
Can I?
I think
Am I
you have to
allowed
wait.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
nope, I'll address it in a second.
I know with a bigger crew, that's hard, because if one guy comes in, contaminates 2 or 3 guys, because you got guys working in groups. And that is and I know most of the guys down there, they'll fight through a cold, but it might not be the best thing for everybody else, but
Right.
for them it is. And the guys need to be making their time so they don't miss the time. So I know it's a hard spot, but I think, if we entertain the thought of changing it to anything over 8. So even if they take a Monday off and they work an overtime, or if they work more than 8 hours on a Wednesday, they still get overtime.
Correct.
Yeah, so say they had Wednesday off there.
So they don't have to work 40 first.
You get whatever your overtime is on Wednesday. Like if you work
Correct.
8 hours and then you work 8 hours extra on Wednesday, you still get paid that, but you don't get, if you take Monday off and you come in after, let's say like Scott said, and you
Yeah.
come in after an appointment, you're gonna have to work till 10 o'clock before you start getting overtime.
Nope,
You have to put 8 hours in before you get overtime at any
Okay.
given time.
and then on a Saturday, it's double time.
It's still, you've already worked your 40
That'd be
hours by
time and a
then,
half.
so
Yeah,
that'd be
time
time
and
and a half.
Okay, nope, I just saying it out loud.
Yeah,
But if a gentleman's out 2 days. And he comes in on Sunday. Plow snow. He's on straight time,
Till he works 8 hours.
till he works 8 hours.
yeah, that day.
Right.
Now, the thing is, we cannot require. Employees to come in and work overtime.
I think we can and
When they took the job, they were required on job regulations that.
yeah, I think there's, yeah, when you take,
You can make, that law has been changed.
Well, the difference is, just so you know, with that is that new addition with Public Works becoming first responders. They're gonna fall under the same classification of a police or fire emergency as well. So there are exceptions in the labor laws to push that, but it has to be certain exceptions. It's not just every blanket time.
yeah, as far as like first responders, I think it'd be the same thing with like CDL licenses where a normal person with a CDL can only drive 10 hours a day, where if you're plowing snow for a municipality, there is no limit to how long you can.
Have that CDL.
Right. But I think that's, if that's the change that everybody agrees on, I think that's probably the best way to do it without being able to take a whole week off and then get overtime all weekend or vice versa.
Yeah, and you know, I know this Wolfboro, for an example, I think they're overtime after 8. And that may be part of their union contract. They have a union up there, so sometimes union contracts trump that. Just because I've sat on both sides of the fence here as a department head and also as a town administrator, I do know that it's also a double-edged sword. So, you know, and I see that if in fact that happens, for an example, if you approve the 8-hour overtime after 8 hours, then potentially if in fact you put that across the board for all town employees, for an example, then, you know, you may end up having, you know, issues there that whether or not they were budgetary issues or, you know, other issues that, you know, the department head wasn't planning on. And now I've come up here and opened a can of worms, but not that I have, you know, any mind reading as to what Jen might be thinking, but
Well, and that's, I mean, she is a department head. Does the board have any objection to hearing?
It's like the town administrator asked the board if Public Works Director could come up.
Correct. So if that's
Street. And we are discussing a town policy.
correct, I think that would be fine as long as the rest of the board's okay with Jen coming up to, as a department head.
I have no problem with it.
Thank you, gentlemen. So I'm in agreement with Ruben. So anything over 8 should be overtime because it shouldn't just apply to sick time. We work elections on a holiday. Same thing. My deputy can't get overtime because she doesn't physically work over 40 and she's there a 16-hour day during elections at least. So
Right. And
just
that's-
other food of thought to think about.
I agree with that.
So
Thank you,
can I just
Yeah,
clarify that? Or try to, what you're saying?
yeah.
But you're saying is for every situation, we saying that they're gonna get paid overtime, anything over 8 hours, even if they don't work 40 in the week? Because I don't think that's gonna fly with the board of labor, the labor board, excuse me. You get what I'm saying? Like, I just.
So I guess
don't know
why
if
would it be any different for a sick time and someone who's actually there working? They don't get overtime because she's only with her time, let's see, 16 hours on a Tuesday for election, then she gets 8 hours for a holiday. So she's not physically going over 40. She's not getting any of that overtime. She's getting like 2 hours overtime, if that.
So I'm just trying to, yeah, I guess I'm not understanding. Ribbon.
I know my math.
Yeah, so no, I'm just not.
Like
wrapping my
that,
head
I wasn't
again.
I feel there could be a problem with Department of Labor over 8 hours, unless they're scheduled for 12-hour shifts, like your fire departments are normally 12-hour shifts.
What I'm saying is if somebody doesn't reach 40 hours in a work week, but say they work at 12 on a snowstorm, they end up with 4 hours of overtime, but they don't reach the 40-hour threshold for an hourly employee in that week.
Okay. But if they did on the sick time, they would make it, or vacation time, they would make it, correct?
Right, because it would be considered time time worked.
Because the way I understand, the way you and Scott had looked at this policy, if I came into work, if I called out sick on Monday and Tuesday, but I worked Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, straight 8 hours, and I just got 2 8-hour days paid for sick time. I work Saturday, I'm going to start getting time and a half.
Right.
So there's really no difference. I didn't work 40 hours yet, but you're going to give me time and a half for Saturday.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm understanding.
Well, what I'm saying is if an employee doesn't, if they adjust their hours or they don't end up working a full 40 hours, the difference would be what we're talking about on the policy is it being considered time worked is the term. So that means if you use your earned time, if you use sick time, if you use that's considered basically regular time, 8 hours for that work day, you're getting credit for that. Whereas if you weren't there, I guess I was just a little confused with Jen's example because she was talking about the holiday
Mhm.
and then the hours worked on the holiday plus the overtime. But is that with an employee who's working the rest of the week though?
Yeah,
Other than that? Okay.
yeah.
Because when you said,
They get off as a holiday.
Yeah.
And I mean, because that's earned time, and they get that time as a holiday.
right. No, I understand that. I just didn't understand whether or not they were actually working out that full 40-hour week aside from the holiday you're talking about.
Right,
But
because
if
they're
you
working
work-
every other day plus,
If you're
Pretty
working
much a
on
double day.
holiday, it's time and a half anyway. Or it should be.
well, we're not physically working on a holiday. It's just the long 16-hour day. You don't get time and a half for that whole time because you're not physically working over 40 that week because of the holiday.
Under your
Okay,
town,
I get what you're saying. If there's a holiday in the middle of the week, you're taking 8 hours off and then I get what you're saying.
And such the elections as the gals did.
Right.
Folks said they had a 16-hour day. She didn't get time and a half for that. She
Right.
should have
No.
gotten time and a half.
No, I get what you're saying now, and I agree with you that this policy, the way you're talking about wording it over 8 hours would rectify that situation.
Would.
Because the holiday you're talking about later on in the week is still that, again, that's considered time
It only
work.
happens every couple of years.
Work, yeah, time work. No, I agree with you.
All right.
Now I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Took me a minute, but I understand it now.
I mean, you're allowed, from my recollections of dealing with the Department of Labor is the board is allowed to be more generous to an employee based upon their time worked versus what the federal standard is. Federal standard says you need to work 40 hours, physically work 40 hours before you're eligible for any overtime. So if there's a holiday, you take sick time, you take vacation time, that is not under the federal standard, that is not called time work at all. You would be paid straight time for any additional time after that. That's the federal standard. But as a town, you have the ability as a governing body to change that as long as you don't change it in other words, saying, well, listen, something crazy on the other side of the house where you say, well, listen, you got to work Because when I started in law enforcement, I worked 45 hours before I could even be eligible for overtime. It just happened to be the way the town did it. Well, they got in trouble for that. They said because the federal standard said 40 hours, and so they had to pay us all that extra 5 hours. But in that situation there, but you can be more, you can allow for doing these things like you already have, where you've counted vacation time and your vacation time and your holidays as time worked. And that's the reason why the town administrator and I looked at this. We said, well, we'll just, if we can do the sick time, that will take care of, my issue was the illness issue and giving it to everybody else. And having not myself or my foreman have to say, you need to stay home, or, we have sent people home, I think, of course, there's been a COVID situation in some of those instances, and other instances it was unknown. But, that's a situation that we get into. And I feel like if in fact we send somebody home, then, we've taken somebody's right away from them when that's how they make their living. But we have to also respect the wellness of everybody else in the workplace.
That's why we also offer sick time serve, so they can build it up and use it. So if we send them home,
Oh, yeah.
they should have to be required to use their sick time. The town shouldn't have to pay them other than their sick time
Well,
or vacation time.
Well, he's not saying that they're not have sick time. If he takes their sick time, but then if they have
No,
overtime.
what he's saying though, is some employees would sit there and say, you refuse me to work, you should have to pay me. And that came up during COVID. When everybody got sent, when people were sent home, we paid them.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, but the town and municipalities, federal government, state government, they give the ability to an employee to build up accrue time. Unfortunately, some won't accrue time. They look at it as a quick day off on some things, and I'm not saying all of them. I just like it this way. The only thing I would ask is, how does this affect the fire departments and police departments that might have shifts that run more than 8?
Right.
That's the only thing we have to look at.
Yeah, well, the fire department's definitely going to, because they're working 24s, I believe. So we would have to get creative with how we word it in the policy, and maybe just make the distinction.
Yeah, because the labor law is pretty clear here. It says any regular rate of pay for all hours actually worked. Time and a half pay for hours actually worked over 40 hours in any work week.
Yeah, but the fire service has a different.
Right,
a
well,
different number. Was it 50?
Yeah, because
they were-
Yeah, the fire department has to work
42 hours.
Yeah, because they're,
Because if they're in I don't know if it's both with 12-hour and with 24-hour shifts, then they have a different standard for the fire side. But I believe all other employees are at the 40.
I would
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like to see that exclusion in there,
Yeah.
defining the departments, that's all.
We'll do is, if it pleases the board, I'll rework the changes in the policy and bring them back next meeting, just so we can see the fresh changes on the
And
policy. And I'll
maybe-
work with you guys too to make sure.
if we're gonna do the 8 hours like we were saying or whatever, can you maybe check and make sure that it's all the legality of it is good before we,
Oh, yeah.
just so we have the answer, not saying that we're gonna do it that way, but so
Sure.
we have an idea of if that's even something that can be done.
Yep.
Thank you.
We can go ahead.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, I also included in your paperwork on the table. So if it pleases the board, there was an email from Stephen Whitley, our lawyer, and a proposal. So in the conversations where we have engaged with the engineering and architectural services to design a building and possibly go to a bond or have a bond hearing. In my conversations with him, Stephen Whitley and his firm do bond counsel on a regular basis. So I asked them to put a proposal together to excuse me, I'm sorry. It's been a long day. To act as bond counsel on behalf of the town, and above and where it is above and beyond the general counsel duties specific to the bond bank bond hearing. You'll see there's he already included a timeline that the board can refer to on where we need to be for each step of this if we are to make it to the warrant. Where we need to be with developing the warrant articles, publishing a bond hearing, notice of bond hearing, and then posting in the warrant, the budget, deliberative session. And then there's some application dates and things that run out into May and June with the bond bank. And if you see in the proposal, they're estimating bond counsel fees of $3,500 to $5,500, depending on how extensive it gets or complicated the warrant needs to be, or things of that nature. But they're not anticipating any egregious costs to jump out.
So is this his letter to us tonight and to what you talked about? This is just preliminary, or this is something that the board's already talked about moving forward with? I might have missed some of this.
Okay.
$10 million or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't.
So originally when we were having the conversations, that was just for conversation speak. That number would be where we end up with once we have the renderings, the floor plans, and the proposal that we just approved and entered into with Teagan Bond and Banwell Architects. We've already started those meetings with them. They're going to develop that number. That was just a conversational piece between him and I, where they were looking at those. We had to have somewhat of a number I actually called the bond bank just to see what the preliminary rates look like and an estimate on a 20-year and a 25-year term. So that number came with other conversations with when we had some other preliminary conversations with other proposals and building outfits that we're looking at using their estimating tools, rough square footages, things of that nature. But no, that number will be defined, has to be defined for the bond. And that's part of the engagement with Teagan Bond and Banwell Architects. And then when we're developing the warrant article, that would be something too at the time that the board could, because specifically part of their services is developing that bond warrant. So everything reads correctly and it's done accordingly. That's something where the board could look at it and say, no, we're not gonna go for this amount of money. We're gonna go for this amount of money and, pare things down or add things, whatever the board's desire is at that point in time. And then that's what will go to the bond hearing. And then you can, take the public's input in.
So basically what you're saying is $285 an hour plus an additional $295 an hour if the other colleague is brought into it.
Yes.
And this wouldn't start until we get to that issuance of a bond or anything though, correct?
Right. It would start once we start getting into bond specific material, because it won't really be the issuance. I mean, there's a lot more that comes on at that point, but he still will be, this includes being part of the development of the warrant and making sure that the postings are all just to oversee posting deadlines and things of that nature.
We have to do this tonight, or can we look at it and complete it back in the next week?
Hey, you can definitely look at it and get back. I don't think we're moving that forward that fast.
I don't think we're ready to set bond and stuff.
I'd like to
right
bring
now.
up, I'd like to read it, bring it back.
Yeah,
sure.
The next
It's not a problem. And if there's any questions or clarification you'd like me to get in the interim too, don't hesitate, because I can reach out. And said he'd be happy to explain or go into a more detail if you'd like. And more of the reason of bringing it to the board was obviously where he's already town council. It was one of those things where I can deal with him for general and then he refer me over to why, and we'd end up going back and forth.
I never had to deal with a bond, ever being a selectman here, so I'd just like to read a little bit more. And
Sure.
understand it better.
Yeah, because I just sat through the whole bond process with my building, but I didn't sit from this side of the table. I sat from Public Works Director side, so this is kind of. And I can tell you that it takes a minute.
Yeah, when I reached out to the director of the municipal bond bank just to get an idea. And obviously they don't have any hard rates right now and they're being very conservative with the numbers they're quoting. But with the email correspondence I had, I first introduced myself and explained why I was reaching out, and her first part of the response was, I don't know if you are or not, but I would highly recommend if you work with bond counsel.
Yeah, no, that's.
Yes, for that. So that was one of the first recommendations.
Well, and I can also tell you that the rates right now as opposed to when I did mine are a lot different. I jumped on the opportunity because the rates were so low when we did the bond to get that done, because it was all but the rates were extremely low when I did mine.
Yep.
But it is a long process, Ryan, so it's a pretty good road.
One step at a time.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll table it.
Yeah, we'll table
No,
this
that's fine.
tonight and give everybody a chance to read it and go over it. And ask questions if you have any.
All right, the last thing I got is actually was a tee off. I was planning on talking a little more about the voting situation. So the meeting, just to clarify, when City got up and she spoke about the meeting. That was not something that came from the board. What that was is after the last meeting we had, the board approved the purchase of the new voting booths. Those voting booths are different size and configuration. I had some conversations with Jen about going over to the school, and she had suggested that we reach out to Robin as well to go, and I completely forgot to extend that invitation to Sydney as well. So that's the meeting that was referred to, just so the board is aware. We went out there last week, tape measure in hand, and looked at the situation over there. So the way it came down right now is next year, all we have is the March town elections. The school schedule is already set. So the school's not going to close for March. It's going to be open. Our only opportunity at that point in time is to use the auditorium. The auditorium will work for the town elections. It is, I mean, we're going to run into the same setup that we had before, where the tables are down at the bottom of the left-hand ramp. We have some handicap booths up at the top. We have to set the other booths up along the front and the stage, all the way out, extending out, and then sort of walking people back around. So obviously it's not ideal. The other question that we raised is whether or not for our general elections and moving forward past next year, whether or not we could utilize the gymnasium at the high school instead of the auditorium. Because originally when I had talked to the superintendent, and he was excited about the idea of the town coming back to the high school, because it was working out that Barnstead votes at their school. He's now the superintendent of all three. He was looking at setting a calendar where he can close all the districts and utilize those with prior planning for teachers' workshops, different things he has to close for. But there's going to need to be a lot of coordination with that, because we need to make sure, because for general elections, I think we all agreed that it wasn't going to work for general elections. You can't with the auditorium. It's just we don't have enough. We got too many booths. The way the booths are configured now with the round booths, they're too big in diameter to have walking room all the way around. We'd end up having to put booths up on the stage. Yeah, it would become very cumbersome. So the only option there would be is if the school can agree to close the school and we can utilize the auditorium to get a flat, straight, area where everything can be in one spot. People aren't standing on the ramps or having to walk. The handicap access is there. They can park out front. They can get in to the front. But again, it depends on, if we run into a jam where the school doesn't close, then we're gonna have a problem. So,
It's too bad in this day and age that the school can't close. But no matter where we have it, there's gonna be people aren't happy where it's at.
right.
But as a public facility, it's a shame that it can't be closed. I mean, they can make them, schools can make a calendar to meet all their needs for workshops, different things, closed for parent teacher conferences now during the day for a day and a half now, not just a day, that they can't allow in their schedule for voting. Especially at the high school, because the elementary school could still go to the school and we're not asking to go there like we used to years ago. It's just too bad when we have to go out and rent another building. Our population hasn't grown that much that we need the church building, and we have capacity of doing, and just hopefully a selectman and the school board and district can work on something that will work for everybody. Works for everybody.
I thought you said he could give us a workshop, teachers workshop.
That's what the superintendent said, but he was referring for the next calendar year. To go right now. So our MOU with the church lapsed after this last voting. So we need to enter into another MOU. It doesn't necessarily have to be for the entire year. We could enter into it for, I mean, usually we encompass it for all the elections for that coming year. For the next year, this coming year, we only have March elections. So we could continue for one event this year, staying at the church for March, where it's such a quick turnaround. And I'm still waiting to hear back from the superintendent. Original conversation I had, yes, that was his intent, was they wanted to close all the schools at the same time, utilizing the workshop. But again, it would have to be for planning for the 24 school year, the 2024-25. Is that right? Yeah.
It almost seems like if we start switching back and forth, it just gets confusing for everybody to vote here for the town election and vote here for,
We wouldn't. If we utilized Catholic Church again. for our national elections, and if the school can.
accommodate us in,
That wouldn't be confusing then.
right.
Yeah.
I just don't want to see it. We're gonna vote here for this and vote there for that, and it just kind of gets.
No, there's no intention of that.
I mean, you get the older folks that are like, well, where do I go to vote? What if I can't, you know what I mean? It's not. I mean, I can get in my car and drive anywhere. It's not me I'm worried about. It's the other people that. So I guess if we can figure out.
Yeah, I'd have to figure out the level of commitment. I mean, it's got to be a pretty solid commitment in order for us, because like you said, we don't want to do it one year and then all of a sudden they say, well, we can't make this work moving forward. Now we're flopping back to the church. That's not my intent. And first of all, I just want to clarify for anybody in the room and everybody else that my intent here was just to bring, not because I have a preference one way or the other where we vote. It does not bother me one bit. The only issue that came up is the duplicative cost. They're requiring a binder for millions of dollars worth of coverage. And now we're going to buy $400,000 worth of coverage that costs us even more money. But I do agree in the fact that $402 isn't the end of the world. But we got to be prepared because it's a premium. It's going to go up every year. It's not going to stay the same. So
Get your presidential elections, your primaries, three times a year.
yeah. Yep. So
And where would that money?
1,400.
Yeah, and where would that money come from? Does we have a?
Well, we have a
fund, or does that come from?
yeah, we have an elections budget, operating budget. It's just not budgeted for right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Plus they do receive a stipend also. Church.
Yes. Oh, and I haven't finished. I'm trying. So originally, the big hurdle is getting over to try to deal with the insurance issue is going through the Archdiocese of Manchester. It's not local. They're not going to be able to sue. They're not going to be able to supersede what's coming down from them. But I still want to try to talk to Father Cole a little bit more and his people over there at the church and see if maybe they're, I mean, like I said, like you said, there's some other money in that MO, and I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it is, but I think it's like $150 or something along the lines that's in that. So maybe through some conversations that maybe there's a little bit more of a common ground we can come to. I'm not sure what kind of room he has or they have as far as working with us on that, but I'd still planned at the last meeting that we had, Paul had asked me specifically if I would go out and talk to him again after directly. And I'm still trying to work all that out too. So in the interim, I still plan on going back to them and talking to them. I do think based on what we discovered over there that I am in agreement with Jen and the moderators as far as I think that we should come up with the $402 for at least for March, because it's a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
And stay at the church through March. But in the interim, it would give us some time to, one, figure out whether or not the school can even commit to closing, which was the original conversation I had with the superintendent. Or two, maybe I can come up with sort of a better arrangement with the church that satisfies both ends of their concerns. Solicit a little more help from Primex too. So, if that is something, the board is.
I think we got to move on March. We're in December now. Let's just make the commitment, do the March.
Yeah, I don't think $400 is a
And
argument point.
like I said, Primex will probably still go up on the premium if we have to keep asking them to put additional insurance on it. But then get a contract from the church or saying for the next 5 years, we want a contract to use the church for elections. What is the cost going to be? What is the church looking for?
Have to be careful with that.
Well, I don't want to do it year to year and we're sitting here debating this
You
thing.
have to run that through the town attorney, our attorney. But
That's just
you need to have a lease or contractual agreements to town with church.
Well, we already do.
We
We're
do.
giving them a stipend now
We give them a stipend.
and we're giving a contract on insurance.
And that is not a contract stipend. Contract.
Well, it's written into an agreement that we sign, if I remember right. Is that correct?
What's that?
Don't we have a written agreement with the church?
A memorandum of understanding.
What is that if that's not a contract, sir?
You gotta be careful. Yeah, read the municipal book. It's right in there. Tonight, but
I can always check into that too.
RSA on that.
Mr. Chairman,
And also talking to some of the people in the town. I was not involved. I didn't live here in Prospect Mountain. But that was one of the high selling points, or whatever you want to call it. It would be able to be used by the town for voting. And that's what I've been told.
No, you are correct, because I was here for that, and the auditorium was a big selling point that could be used for community functions and things and voting. The other big selling point is the shelter. The high school is the shelter, the emergency management shelter.
Well, I voted in 3 different places here, so it's. But Mr. Wentworth, go
I
ahead.
make a motion that the town meeting voting for 2023 will be held at St. Catherine Drexel for the $402 additional insurance.
Give us time to
In
figure out.
case you haven't done that yet, when I was
Right.
out last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet.
We have not done that.
So we can at least put this part to bed.
Right,
work
and
on
figure it out
2020.
down the road. At least we have a place to do it.
Mhm.
And you can work on. Well, actually, can I get a second I'll second it for discussion right now. So we can do that and you can work on the school and or whichever way we're gonna go.
Yeah, figure it
what
out.
The best option is. And then with that, no, we already voted that and so we're good there. So yeah, just figure out what the
Mhm.
best option is. But yeah, I'm okay with,
Yeah, because I have no problem.
yeah, I mean, we gotta have a place to vote.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
all right. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
That's it. That's all I
That's
got.
it. All right. Approval of minutes.
I don't think there's any in there.
I don't have any in here.
No, there's none in.
We can skip that, right?
Yep.
All right, consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the Alden Board of Selectmen's consent agenda, December 5th, 2022. Items 1 and item 2.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, public input. Yep. Good evening, Robin.
Well, thank you for staying with the church. As you all know, I'm an advocate for the church. My problem is every couple of years, we go through this roundabout where we're gonna have the election. I know it's up to you folks. My problem, there's no communication between us. Whenever there's an election, I need to know what selectmen are coming per the RSAs, what times. I've called, I've left messages. No one calls me back. So I hope the next moderator that steps in after me here will get better courtesy. I'm not going to work in an auditorium. You're not listening to the people that have to work those elections. The courtesy I do when we have a handicapped person that comes in, I go up and down those ramps in that auditorium all day. I personally have a bad leg. I can't walk the next day, and that's just walking on level ground. Now we go to the auditorium. No one hears me. The problem is the workers come in. They can't get a parking spot because the students are supposed to park somewhere else. They don't. When we come in between 6 and 6:30, we're looking for parking spots. So the workers can't even get a spot, never mind the taxpayers. So I'd like that thought of. Now, when you do talk about the elections, going back to the school, I think the school is beautiful. If you went to the auditorium, that would be the gymnasium.
Gymnasium.
That would be a very good setup. You would not get an argument from me on that one. The auditorium, however, it's a bad situation. The air in there it gets to you after an all-day thing. The lighting is not that good in there. You have to bring in more expenses. By the time you accommodate what the taxpayers need in there, you're paying more than the $400 binder insurance thing. I understand this is all meant in a good way, but for every complaint you get for the church, I can match the complaint on the school. And it's not just me. It's not just the workers. It's no matter what you do, folks. You've lived long enough, you know, no matter what you do, there's going to be a complaint. What you got to do is figure out who's working it and who is dealing with the public. And you all know I'm there from 6 a.m. to that last box is sealed. And my husband and I go back to the town hall because we don't want two girls going into that town building late at night by themselves. So my husband goes. So I do hope you put these thoughts in because I'm not running again as a moderator. I'm getting too old for this. And the elections, that's where I lost it. The school. Okay, for the town, but please keep in mind that you have the generals, primaries, and all that. The school would have to be closed for that as well to be handled in the auditoriums. So I hope that's brought into the conversation when you do your calendars. And I think Sydney handled it very well. Good job, Sydney. I'm not going to add any more to that. Please think of the people.
Yep. Thank you, Robin.
Because they come here, they're not getting paid. Please think of them.
I have nothing more to say about elections. I just had a question on the overtime proposal. Because I think I heard it said a couple of different ways. So the overtime that I know is the overtime that you know and that you spoke of. You work 40 hours and then you get overtime. And then I think the first thing I heard was if somebody has a sick day, you want them to still be able to get overtime. But then I also heard you say if they use their earned time, which to me is vacation time. Is that correct?
I would agree with that.
Okay, so if somebody takes vacation time during the week, you're proposing that they still be eligible for overtime.
That's the current policy.
But that's the current policy.
If it's
It's the one
My
that's been in
bad.
effect
I
for
should know
years.
that. I definitely should know that.
The only thing that's not included in that was sick time. So the original proposal was to include sick time as time worked,
Okay,
like vacation time or bonus
Okay.
time or personal time.
all right. So I don't know what the answer is. And obviously, nobody here does. But I get concerned and the hair on the back of my neck stands up when I hear discretion, that we use discretion and that one department may be eligible for 8 hours and another department might not be because of the type of work they do. And I'm not referring to police or fire. They fall under a completely different standard. They know that when they take the job. But in terms of like what Jen's talking about, the elections and the people in the tax collector's office and the town clerk's office, they're eligible, but perhaps maybe the planning department isn't eligible when they have to attend a meeting. I mean, these are all things that you guys are going to have to really take into consideration if you put this policy in place, because how many times do you have planning board people attend meetings? You have the code enforcement officer that comes to selectmen's meetings to talk about things. This is all going to now be overtime. This is a lot. That's a lot of money that we're talking about here. When overtime, as I know it is, if you work more than your 40 hours. Again, my bad. I should have known it was, apparently that was the rule when I was a selectman. But this is kind of a snowball effect. And when you give people the authority to use discretion and say, well, if you see a pattern, this guy's calling out every Monday, but wants in the wintertime to get overtime, I think the Department of Labor is going to have an issue with that. And I think we open ourselves up to a lawsuit from other employees. And I also think that people shouldn't consider making their money based on overtime. You make your money based on straight time of the job you were hired for. If you get overtime, okay. But banks don't look at overtime when they determine how much money somebody makes and they give out a loan because it's not guaranteed. And I don't think people should think of it as guaranteed. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm concerned about liability and about whether that's going to become an issue for other departments. And then I just had a question on the bond. Is this for a new municipal building, fire department? What is it for?
Right now, our contractual engineering and architects is for an independent DPW building and a public safety complex.
Which would include police and fire?
Yes.
Okay. Don't disagree that it's not needed at all. I do question the timing though. We are in the highest interest rates in 2 decades. A lot of people have chosen to put some things off. You buy that bond, you go into the municipal bond bank. You're likely to have some prepayment penalties if you pay off that bond early in order to refinance it, unless you can have them write some call provisions in there. All things I'm sure your bond counsel will tell you, but just things to consider. Predictions are that towards the 3rd quarter of next year, the Fed will have to start lowering rates again. And this might be year from now thing. I mean, I'm not sure you really have time to get it in there beforehand, but anyway, those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lauren Carr. I think it was three meetings ago, you talked about the $55,000 for this architect, research person. Where, is that gonna be a warrant article, or are you, where are you getting the money for this person?
We had a public hearing for, they pulled it out of a combination of the fire department capital reserve and the public works department's building capital reserves. Because both of them have language in their capital reserves for improvements and or replacement of the building. So we had a public hearing when I think you were gone then, but we had a public hearing first before the board made the decision to pull the money out of the capital reserve.
The capital reserve warrant article said it was for improvements or replacement.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Do we have any non-publics?
No, we do not.
We do not. I'll entertain a motion, gentlemen. Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
I,
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Like I need one more.
No, I was wrong on the quote.
What?
When I said improving or replacing, it's improving or expanding.